In here, for this example, we're going to write a code that returns elements which sum of sequent adjacent elements less or equal to the limit. That's a little bit confusing, but as an example here, we're given a array. And this is just for an example here. I have a larger one that we're going to be dealing with. But for this, we have 9, 5, 8, 19, 1, 6, 5, and our limit is 13. And this is going to be the return. Now this can be a little bit confusing, so how it works is basically we have this first element right here, and then we're going to add it to this next element. If these two are less than 13, we are going to continuously look at other elements until we get something that's either 13 or would be greater than 13. Once that happens, we are going to go and just add this to an array that we would print out here. We can see that we have one large array denoted by like these outside parentheses. As a matter of fact, this is a little bit incorrect, the instructions. It should be more like this. So we have outside parentheses, and then instead of this semicolon, we should have an inside parentheses, or an inside comma, because you can think of this as like a array inside of an array. We have these arrays inside of one large array, and we're going to be using array lists for this one. And that's basically how it's going to work. We are just going to add into it. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to make two arrays. Okay, I'm going to make one that's an object array list, and it's going to hold all of these array values. It's going to be the outside one. And then I'm going to have a temporary array list that is for like each of these individual parts. And we're going to reset it every single time so we can write into it every single time. We're going to keep track of our limit. We're going to have a sum as well, and the sum is to make sure that we don't go over our limit. And we have some more code, but we're going to look at that and how I actually went about writing this, because it took me a while to get it done, and I used the IntelliJ IDE debug to help me go through this, and we're going to demonstrate that here as well. So we have our public class main, public static void main, and then we have our initial array. So this could be like user input if we wanted to, but we're just hard coding it in here for this example. Next we have our int sum. Int sum is equal to 0 because we're just declaring it, and then we are declaring these array lists. Again, one needs to be an object because it's going to store the arrays in here. And an array list is a object type. So this is going to be a string. This temp is going to store these values once we convert it to a string, and then we're going to store in here. The reason why we need to convert it to a string is because if we want like spaces in here, which should also be in the instructions as well, we want spaces inside of here, and that is going to be part of our array list. If we didn't want to, we would still do it like this, or we could just keep it as a integer and then just keep the integers in here, and it will automatically put the commas in. You'll see in our code we don't need any commas because array lists automatically separate our elements with commas. So again, if you didn't want to have this as a string, you could make it as a integer if you didn't want the commas, and we can just take that out, and they're going to be inside later down here. I'm also going to be cleaning up this code because it's a lot of code, so we can run through it now. So we have our string subset is equal to this. This is also declaring it. We have our int length is equal to our arr.length. And this is just because if we ever want to manipulate this, I like to store it in here whenever we're dealing with arrays. Just because if we want to manipulate this, we can't change the size of our array length, but we can change the size of this length, because this is just set equal to this, and we can always increment it, change it wherever we want. Now it doesn't look like we are going to be doing that in this code, but that's just something to note. So we could axe this for this, we don't need it, and then just put the arr.length inside of here and save one line of code. Inside of here we have our for loop. We're going to run this the entire length right here, and then we're going to increment our a every single time. Now there is some problems here, and we're going to see this in our debug if we were just to run it straight like this. We have this if statement, and then we have this try catch statement, and then we're going to print everything out. We don't need this period, I'm assuming, but if we are to run it, it's going to run and look like the following. So that is how we would have everything in here. We can see that it omits everything bigger than 38. That's how you run this code. Now we're going to step through it with the debug menu so that we can get a better idea of it. I put our breakpoint just by clicking line 16, and it's going to show up here. We're only going to do a few instances of this just because running through it is just very repetitive. Now we can see that our limit is 13, our sum is initially 0, our total array is 0 and our temp is 0. Our subset is also just going to be blank like this. Now we can run through here by stepping through. So we're going to step over, we're going to go to the next one. We see if our subset is equal to done, we want to do a minus minus. And we'll come back to why we want to do a minus minus once we go through this a little bit more. So we are going to come back to this if statement because it is very important right here. So we're going to skip over this. We are going to go into our try. And the reason why we need to go into try is because we have this if statement right here. Now we're saying if this array element is less than our limit, we're going to be in here. Well, what if we have an array out of bounds? This is going to happen because we are going to run this and it's going to be equal to the length of the array. And even though we have it less than or equal to solve this problem, I put it in a catch statement. So when we do run out of array elements, we are going to break out of this try and we're going to fall into this catch. And all this catch is doing is it's adding the temporary array to our total array. So it's going to be like, it doesn't show it here, unfortunately, in the console, but it's going to be like how we are adding the last array inside of our array. Without this, it wouldn't work for how this code is set up. So inside of here, we have true. Now we haven't changed anything yet. That's just our first check. The next check is if our sum, so remember sum is 0 now, but we are going to add onto it every single time so that we can see if it's less than 13. So if our sum plus the array element that we are currently looking at is less than or equal to the limit, then we are going to have a true here. So this is true. That means we're going to be inside of this if statement. Now, the first thing that we have here is where we're adding it together. We talked about that. It's pretty simple. This, we don't need this. This was just kind of like practice. We don't need that. We don't need that. That was for testing as well. Next, we have this temp.add. And what we're adding in here is our array.toString. And so what we're doing is we are taking this, this index, this element at the index, and we are converting it from an integer to a string. And that's just because we are going to, I believe, put a space in between them. Although, like I said, that's not necessary to convert it to a string. We could always just try to do this as a index or an integer as well. We could change this from type string to type integer. So that's one way we could do it also. We have if our sum is greater than the limit, we are going to add it to the total array. Then we need to reset the sum and the subset. We can see that's not going to apply here because we're already in this if statement. So we're going to skip over this else if statement for now. So you can see I went through and I made this an integer instead of a string type. And I went down in here and changed this from a toString to a integer, just leaving it as is. And then I also did the same, I believe, somewhere around here. So if we were to run it, we'll just cancel out of the debug for now. We still have these spaces in here, so that is good. It looks like we didn't need to do the string type, so we've just figured that out. We fixed it, and our code still runs as we want it to. Now we can go back in the debug menu. I don't know how to go exactly back to where we were, so we're gonna have to just step through this again. And I've just stepped through it one time. We're on the second iteration where a is equal to 1 here. Well, when a is equal to 1, we're gonna still skip over this done. We're gonna come back to it again in a second. We're gonna hit this try statement because this element does exist, so it is less than our limit. It is true, so we are going to be inside of here. Now, I didn't really explain this last time. I think if we've already gone through this, our temp is going to store this 9. It's going to be inside of here. So temp stores our 9, right? Because that's the previous element. It was at index 0. Now we're at index 1, right? A is 1. It was previously 0. At index 1, we have a 5. So we are doing 9 plus 5. That's what we're trying to do here. Sum, which is the 9, plus our 5 is equal to 14. And this is greater than our limit, so we can see that our IntelliJ tells us that it's false. And since it's false, we're not going to be inside of this if statement. We're going to step down to our else if statement, and we check this. And we can see that this is going to be true. We could probably just do this as an else statement, but I like to have an else if statement because it really tells me what I'm doing. So inside of here, what we're going to want to do is we want to add the temp. Right, and I don't know if we exactly have to have this as a toString, but we can, because it doesn't mess up the code. It might be able to change this. You can try it, but I'm just going to leave it as a toString for here. So we do total.add, and then we add in our temp. Remember, the temp is going to be this array, and currently it holds 9. So we're adding 9 into our total array. After we do this, we want to clear our temporary array so that we can have it ready for the next thing. Same thing with our sum, and same thing with our subset. Now our subset, the way we clear it is we put done. And the reason why we put done is because we've gone through this entire for loop and we haven't even looked at A1. Remember, A1 is 5. We only look at it if we go into here. So what we need to do is, if it's done, we need to take a step back and we need to do A minus minus. So we can go back one index. And then this is where we really reset the subset to just a space. So we can step through it. We can see that we're going to clear our array. We can see that our total is going to be 9 right here. That's the element. We can step through it, and we are going to fall through the catch. We can come back up to our for loop. We're going to hit this if statement. This if statement is going to be true because our subset does equal to 1. You could probably do like subset dot is equals or something like that, since this is a string method. The subset's a string method. And then inside of here, we're going to decrement our a. So we can see that it went from a being 2 to a being 1. And now our subset is going to change from done to just these quotes. That's good. We can go in this if statement here. And now we are going to do the same process where now our temp stores 5. And then we're going to go through this again. We can see that we're going to skip the first if statement because we didn't go through the else. We're going to hit this if statement. This is going to be true. So we're going to come down here and we are now going to add into our array again. So we add into our sum. We can see that our sum is going to be 13 because we have our 8 plus 5. And then we're going to do temp.add, where we're going to add into our temp array this. Now, because it's an array list, we don't have to specify the index. It's just going to add to the end of it. So we can see that if we expand this to the bottom here, our temp array at index 0 is going to be 5, at index 1 is going to be 8. And then we go through this catch. We don't go through it, we go past it. And now we're going to go back to the for loop. We're not going to go into this first if statement. We're going to go into our try. We're not going to go into the second if statement though. And that's because this is false, because we have 5 plus 8, that gives us 13. So anything we want to add, which like this 19, is not going to work because it's going to be over 13. So we're going to fall into our else if statement at the bottom. It should fall through. It looks like it skipped it. And the reason why I was confused is because I thought we would be adding this 19. We're totally skipping this 19 because if we look at this first if statement, it says if our array element is less than or equal to limit is when we're inside of here. Otherwise, we can look at this entire if statement and it's just going to fall through the catch. That's why it fell all the way down. So I was a little bit confused because I didn't know it was 19. So if we look, we're on a equal to 4. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be this 1 right here. Since we're on this 1, we're still going to be above 13 because 8 plus 5 is what we had previously. That's 13 plus 1 is 14. So we totally skipped over 9. You can go back, click like the J button a couple times, and you can go back and see we just totally fall through this entire thing because the element is not less than our index. And we don't go into this catch either because the exception is that this doesn't exist. So we're going to, and we do fall into the try, right? So since we initially go into the try, we don't hit the catch. We go into the try, we fail our if, and then we just totally go past here. So that is why the 19 is not in there. So now, again, we're looking at 1. We have our 5 and 8. We are in our else if. Now we're going to add into here. So we have total.add. Once I step through this, we can see that our total is going to be 9, 5, and 8. That's our next indexes. Right? That's the index of 1 is going to be equal to 5, 8. And then we're going to reset everything down here. So everything is 0, it's done, and then we're going to go into the first if statement, and we're going to decrement our a to 4. We're going to click done, and we're going to go through again and just look at everything. We can see that we fall through just because it has something to do with how the actual numbers are. It's kind of the same thought as the previous one. And then we could just go through here and it would repeat the entire thing. I'll try to have this code in the description below the like button, at least in a file, so you can download it and try to run it for yourself. And then, because I think this one is pretty cool, it took me a while to get, and I had it with the help of the IntelliJ debugger. So I'm going to stop and rerun this, and we can see that we get exactly what we want here. So that's how we would look at this code. It's super long code, but super fun code, and anything like it. There are more how-to Java videos in the playlist linked below the like button. Those are pretty fun, but I would say that this is the most fun so far.